Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's CPE for Lunch session on Sage Intacct, Collaborate, and Audit Trail. Today's presentation is going to be predominantly around, it's going to be more demonstration heavy, but I did want to make sure that I put enough information on the slides for you to have as a guide or general, just for general information that you can save out somewhere back at your office. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So as the title of this presentation made clear, we're talking about Sage Intacct, Collaborate, and the Audit Trail. So we're digging into a couple of, just digging into the definition of what Intacct Collaborate is. So Intacct Collaborate is Salesforce's, the Salesforce CRM. It's Salesforce's chatter functionality that's layered on top of Intacct. Intacct, if you don't know, has a very tight integration and a very close working relationship with Salesforce. And part of that has netted Intacct users the ability to utilize the chatter functionality. So this functionality has actually been available for a few years now, but in this day and age of more remote working conditions, and for those companies who are larger and more spread out, Collaborate is a really good way for you and your staff to communicate directly within Intacct. Now, a lot of organizations use something like a Slack or a Microsoft Teams to keep in to keep in contact with their team now. But one of the advantages of using Intacct Collaborate is that you can communicate with your team on particular records inside of Intacct. So instead of like having a generic chat with someone in like Microsoft Teams, just like in general, you can actually communicate on a record-by-record basis in Intacct. So what I mean by that is you can pop open an AP bill or a customer record, and you can ask someone, oh, hey, on this bill, what's the deal with this bill? It seems like we're overpaying for this. Is there some way that we can decrease our expense on this? Or for a customer, you can have a chat on a customer that says, hey, these folks have really, they've really run up their AR balance recently. What can we do about maybe changing their AR terms or their credit limit or something like that? The cool thing about that is that your conversation is kept within the transaction record itself, so that in the future you can dig up that information and look back and figure out what was all said on that transaction. Now, you might think that that might make this a really super good tool for keeping track of your documentation for audit purposes. Theoretically, it can be used well for supplementary information, but I wanted to make sure this got on the slide deck. So even though attachments are supported inside of Intacct Collaborate, please do not use Collaborate in place of the normal attachments feature. And the reason for that is when you use the actual attachments field in Intacct, they're pretty permanent. It's very, very difficult to unassociate attachments from their records, supporting documentation from their records. You have to be an administrator, and you have to like open periods and go record by record and jump through all these hoops to even deassociate them. The problem with Collaborate is if you're an administrator, you can just go in and delete conversations and delete chat elements. So because of that, I can't really suggest that you use Collaborate as a means of storing vital documentation. You can still use it as supplementary information, but just don't rely on it for something that you might need for an audit someday, because you're an administrator with a bad day away from losing that. So for the same reasons as I listed above, do not use Collaborate in place of the formal approval processes inside of Intacct. And I'm kind of restating the point here, but I think it's important to note. So let's just say instead of using the approval processes inside of Intacct for like AP bills, because maybe they're a little bit too restrictive or it eats up too much time processing them, you can theoretically go in and say, oh yeah, I approve this bill for payment, but then you decide later, I'm just going to delete that message, but it's already been paid. So now there's no record in the system that even shows where this transaction was approved. So Collaborate is a great tool, but do not use it in place of the normal approval processes or the attachments feature. So I feel like I kind of gave the medication commercial pitch there, where we talk about the benefits and then we talk about all the negative side effects. But we're going to get into the positives later. So we're done talking about Collaborate for the time being, or defining it. Let's go ahead and move over into the standard audit trail definition. Now, one thing I just wanted to say from the get-go so that folks aren't confused is there is the standard audit trail that comes with Intacct, and then there is the advanced audit trail that appears as a subscription in the it appears as a subscription in the subscriptions list. They are two different things. The advanced audit trail is only used for those companies that need to stay HIPAA compliant, and there's an extra cost associated with it and stuff like that. Fortunately, to enable that, you do need to jump through some hoops. So the odds are low that you're going to enable it by mistake, but still, just know that there's a standard audit trail and an advanced audit trail. Most organizations are fine with the standard audit trail, and that's what we're talking about today. So the standard audit trail is a back-end function that tracks activity. So it's going to track the who, what, where, and what the changes were. Yeah, so it tracks all those different things, and it's the standard audit trail is deployed in all instances automatically. So if you're using Intacct today, it means it's already been deployed. Now, for those of you who have been on Intacct for maybe longer than a few years, back in the day, like back in like 2016, 2017, there used to be an install process that we would have to do to install the audit trail functionality. But now, and there was a particular quarterly update where Intacct just enabled that for everyone automatically. So regardless as to when you started using Intacct, you have it now. I did want to make a little note to say that some record types retain more details than others. We're going to talk about this in more detail later, but just note in general that the before and after audit trail information that you can get is going to be a lot more detailed for master records and like header information on transactions. You're not going to see as much detail for like transaction rows and and things like that. So I also we're not going to walk through this on the demo. Excuse me. We're not going to be walking through enabling Collaborate on the demo because we already have it enabled. But it is performed under company, under subscriptions. As such, you do need to be a system administrator to enable it. So the row to enable it looks like this. It's going to say Intacct Collaborate, and it's going to, you need to switch on that little slider up to the right to the on position. And you're going to notice that whenever you enable a subscription or a module inside of Intacct, it's going to say, oh, you may incur additional costs for this. But you don't have to worry about that. In this case, Collaborate is a zero cost module, so you can just ignore the warning. However, you will need to agree to terms and give it a little bit of time to complete. So really technically, since Intacct Collaborate is just Salesforce chatter, you do need to agree to terms with Salesforce, and it does take several minutes to, I think the most I ever had it take was a couple hours for the connection to complete. So those are the steps to enable Collaborate. And we'll talk more about, we'll walk through those steps real quick in a little bit. And then just a couple of things to note, that once the Collaborate module has been completely implemented, you, whoever switched it on, will receive an email saying, yep, Collaborate's all set to go. And then you will also, you and your users, the next time you log into Intacct, will also receive a prompt when you log in. So this prompt will say, hey, welcome to Intacct Collaborate. Here's an intro video you can watch. Here's where you can read up on more information about it. And then there's a button where you can just ignore it and just proceed on with your day. So those videos and those articles are really helpful because it gives your people a quick overview as to what Collaborate is. So once Collaborate is enabled and completely configured, there will now be in the upper right corner of your screen, you're going to see a chat bubble that appears right by like the My Preferences area where your name is in the upper right of Intacct. But that chat bubble is going to serve as your Collaborate hub. So that's where you can go and see what messages you were tagged in, what activities you need to review, things like that. And we'll be digging into that in a little bit. So all those things I just talked about were pertaining to the Collaborate functionality that I wanted to make sure got on the slides. So for the standard audit trail, or for the audit trail, you're going to find that you can run an audit trail report on a record by record basis. So you should notice that when you go into view or edit any one of your records in the system, there's a section under more actions in the upper right, and there's a button that says view audit trail. So you want to run that view audit trail button if you want to see the history behind that particular transaction or record, right? So for example, you created a vendor back in like 2019, but its address has changed multiple times. Your main contact person has changed a few times. They've had their name changed multiple times. All that information will be kept on this in this area, and it will tell you what the before and after values were. Now, that's on a record by record basis. If you want to pull out just a report that shows you all the activity for a period, like who did what, from where, you can use the custom report writer in either platform services or customization services, and use the audit history object, and that will allow you to build a report that shows you all of your audit history. So this is great to show, to keep tabs as to like what people are doing in the system. But the thing it's not going to give you automatically is it's not going to give you what the before and after values were. The before and after values are only determinable from actually going into the record in question, going under more actions, and selecting view audit trail. So that's really the only way that you'd see that. And I did want to make a note. So this is kind of restating what I talked about earlier, but I wanted to make sure this got on the slides. Currently, the audit trail tracks before and after values on just header level header fields or master fields or master record items. It's not going to go down into the transaction rows and tell you when an account is changed and something like that. So yeah. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more later, but for the time being, we'll just leave it at that. Okay. So I'm going to be switching to the demo. So now with that out of the way, we are going to go into the demonstration portion now. Okay, so I have Intacct open. So I have this company open called Clearly. This is the company I'm working with today. And what I wanted to just note is that I have two tabs open. I have Emma Penny, who is the controller, and she's the administrator of Intacct, the administrator of Collaborate, all that stuff. She has all the power. So we also have a secondary user named Nick Tesla. So I'm the type of person who likes to have fun with usernames, but this is actually one that came with the company. So I did not create this user, but it's fun that other people like to have fun with names as well. So anyway, so I'm in Intacct right now. So what we're going to run through first is we're going to run through how you can use Collaborate, and then after we talk about Collaborate, we're going to talk about items on the Audit Trail side. So to start, essentially, we're just going to run through what we did earlier, or what I showed earlier. I'm going to go under Company, under Subscriptions, and then I'm going to go down to Intacct Collaborate, and I've already switched it on, but I just wanted to run through that because this is where you would go to then switch this on. And then when you switch it on, like I said before, you have some terms to agree with, some terms to agree on with using Salesforce functionality and stuff like that. And I also wanted to go into the subscriptions page because you're going to notice a section that says Advanced Audit Trail. Don't worry about this. Disregard this. Don't call your account manager and say, hey, we need the audit trail. You already have what you need. So just ignore this. Okay. So the example I wanted to show you to start off with for Collaborate is, let's just say Emma wants to figure out, hey, how can we reduce electricity costs or something like that. So what Emma is going to do is Emma's going to go under Accounts Payable, underneath Bills, and she's going to open up this bill for Pacific Gas and Electric. And since Intacct is based on the West Coast, most of these vendors are West Coast vendors. So we're going to open up our PG&E bill. In Michigan, this would probably be consumers. But when I have Collaborate turned on, you're going to notice that underneath most of your record types inside of Intacct, you're going to see this little almost social media-esque area underneath your transaction. So it allows you to write up a post, share a file, share a link. You can follow records, all things like that. We're going to dig into some of these in a little bit, but as Emma, I'm going to go in and say, hey, Nick. So you can tag people in messages to make sure that it gets their notice. So, hey, Nick, you know a lot about electricity. Can we cut our costs? So so with Tesla being he knows a thing or two about electricity, he is going to get an email. Now we're kind of at the mercy of email servers right now, but Nick should now be receiving, or shortly be receiving, a message saying, hey Nick, someone sent you a message inside of Intacct. Here's what they said, yada yada yada. So, like I said, it might take a couple minutes for the message to actually come through. Usually it's a few seconds, but if email servers are slow, or if load time is high, or if server load is high, it might take a few minutes. So we're not going to wait around for that. but just know you will get an email. But Nick, when he's going around Intacct, he can go up into his chat bubble and he'll get a little notification. Aha. So you will receive an email saying so-and-so mentioned you in a post, and here's what the post says. And by the way, you can disable emails if you want. If you're the type of organization that's going to be using Collaborate a lot, you may not want emails because you're going to bog down your email, but just know that that's an option that each user can set. But so I'm in as Nick right now. So when I click on the chat bubble, I can see that Emma had asked Nick a question, and it says the question right here. But the really neat thing about Collaborate is that I can then click on this message right here, and it will take me to the record, transaction, whatever in question. So if I scroll down here, I then see my message from, or the message from Emma asking, can we cut our costs here? Being Tesla, I can just say yes. Just let me finish my free energy device, and we can get rid of it. We can get rid of this. And I just realized I spelled device wrong, so please forgive me for that. And once again, since I responded to Emma, Emma will now receive an email saying, Nick has replied to your post. And this one is a lot quicker. And there we go. So now a little bit of a transaction has occurred here on the bill. So now, fast forward a few years, if you go back and drill into this transaction, you will then see all the different chat elements that have occurred on this bill, which is really super useful for internal auditing and trying to figure out what exactly the conversation was around that particular record. This is really useful because the alternative is you just communicate through email or Teams, which it may get the job done, but the problem then becomes if you need to try to do research for a particular transaction, you need to sweep through emails, and things might have gotten deleted, or people may have left the organization, and it becomes very difficult to determine what happened and what the conversation was around that item. So Collaborate is a really neat tool for tracking that type of information. Another thing you can do is you can also attach files. Even though I suggested you don't use it for crucial information, I can attach a record like a PowerPoint presentation on the record, and it will import it and attach it to the transaction. Or you can also link. You can also link a URL and then you assign it a name. So let's just say maybe your company uses SharePoint or something like that, and there's a particular SharePoint URL that you want to direct your people to when they click on it. Just for the sake of just showing you what it looks like, PG&E is a publicly traded company. So in the event where someone was curious enough to, or in the event where you wanted to just link that transaction to a live feed of the stock price, you can do that. And then you can click on the link, and then it'll take you there. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with Collaborate when it comes to what you can attach. And under File, notice how your maximum file size is 2 gigabytes. So it really allows you to use assign some very, very large files on your records. All right, so now I'm going to show you exactly why I say don't use this for tracking super crucial documentation and then things like that. And this is especially true as to why you should not use it for approvals in place of the normal approval process. Because here's why. Okay, so I'm back under my tab as Nick, and I refresh my screen so that I can see all of my conversation elements here. So as Nick, I can't go in, and Nick is not an administrator, so he can't go in and delete other people's things. So I can't delete out Emma's notes at all. But notice how I have the ability to delete my own comments. So theoretically, let's say that instead of using the actual approval processes inside of Intacct, your organization is using Collaborate. The problem with that is if someone says, hey, Wes, do you approve this transaction for payment? I can say, yeah, go ahead and pay it. I approve of it. Well, then after it's been paid and processed, I can just go into the transaction and just say delete. And there's never going to be any trail that I even ever approved it. So of course that's problematic when it comes to auditability, but depending on what industry you're in, especially if you're a nonprofit, you're going to have some major issues. You're going to have some major issues there if you're paying things with no proof that anyone even approved it. So with me being Nick Tesla, eventually he would, if he were to live long enough, he would determine, oh, hey, yeah, I mean, free energy devices aren't really possible because it breaks the law of like mass energy conservation or something like that. So I don't want to make myself seem like a fool at all. So I'm going to delete out my comment. So now that comment no longer exists. So you can, it's not like there's no audit trail event that says something was deleted. It just vanishes from existence. So that's exactly why you don't want to use Collaborate for that purpose. But if you're an administrator, like Emma, it becomes even crazier because Emma has the ability to delete other people's comments in addition to hers. So as Emma, I'm going to go in and we may have had all these conversations on these items, but I'm going to delete out the entire, I'm going to delete out all this activity on this transaction. So there's no proof that any conversation ever happened. So just be careful. Be careful when you're using Collaborate. Only use it as a means of communication and some optional supplementary information. Do not use it. Assuming if no one deletes it, you can use it for an audit because it retains all the records for you. But because of the ease of deletion, I would suggest against it. Use your attachments. Use your actual attachments field, and if you're doing approvals, use the Intacct approvals. That pretty much concludes, for the most part, what we were going to talk about with chatting using Collaborate. All right. So before we get into the Audit Trail functionality, I did just want to speak just high level on some of the other features that Collaborate has. So if we go into View All in the Collaboration Center, it opens up a new screen. So depending on your rights within Intacct, you can actually go in and set up particular groups. So let's just say, this may be more applicable for larger organizations, but let's just say you have like a purchasing team or a a general ledger team, or maybe if you have view-only users inside of Intacct, maybe you have this project team or that project team or outreach team or marketing or things like that. So you can group people into teams, and you can have chats with just that team, and you can, just like how you can tag people inside of conversations, you can also tag groups. So you can send out a message to the executive team, the board, whatever. And that is maintained in the groups area. In addition to conversations on records, this does also function like almost like a social media in a way. So I can directly go to Nick's page and leave a comment on his page, asking him a question, maybe a little bit more personal chat or whatever. Although I will say, most organizations that have moved to like a Microsoft Teams or a Slack, if they're having more informal conversations, they're typically having them in there. But you can also have those type of conversations and direct messages inside of Collaborate as well. Now, I think it's the default for most clients to say, yeah, go ahead and make Collaborate available to everyone. Everyone's free to use it. But one of the things you can do, is you can disable Collaborate for your people. So if this person probably should not be using Collaborate, then you can set disable Collaborate, and then they can no longer use Collaborate. So maybe not everyone needs to use Collaborate, or maybe this person, you're worried that they're going to use Collaborate more for personal chats as opposed to business. So, but that's your decision to make. You're free to do whatever you want with that. So, Chris, is my audio working better again?
Yes, we can hear you fine now. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. That's really everything I had when it comes to Collaborate. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the Audit Trail functionality. So, in a similar vein to, I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm rambling now. We're just going to be working with Emma for the rest of this term, for the rest of this session. We're not going to worry about Nick anymore. But let's just say I want to figure out what changes were all made to a record. So what I'm going to do is I'm working in a multi-entity company here, so I need to click Include Private. But let's just say I wanted to go in and make some modifications to my Verizon business bill right here. Okay. So before the session started, I did make a few changes. So if I pop in the right to more actions, I can then see where it says View Audit Trail. And what it's going to show me is it's going to show me what was changed, when, who modified it, whether it was through the user interface or like a CSV import, through the API, whatever. But notice that the Audit Trail is keeping track to the point where this is on Pacific time. At 4 o'clock Pacific time, the bill number field was changed to VI0264 to VI024. But let's go ahead and make a couple other changes to the header. So maybe for the reference number, we put in like a purchase order number. For description, we'll say hi there as a description. I know this probably wouldn't occur in a live environment, but I just want to show what is all tracked with the Audit Trail and what isn't. So what I'm going to do is I made a couple of changes to my header fields right here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit post. And then once it posts, I'm going to open it back up, and then we're going to see what was all changed on the audit trail. So it looks like my instance is being a little slow right now, so I'll just be patient with it. Well, it sure is taking its time right now. While we wait for it, oh, there it is. So now once I've done that, and once again, everything is on Pacific time, so it's 3 hours behind us. So I see where this change was made. The reference number used to be blank, but now it's PO number. So this is what I mean by header level information. So when you make changes to a number or a vendor's name or something like that, it's going to keep track of the before and after changes. What you are not going to see yet, now my understanding is Intacct is working on this, is if you change an account from like one account to another, so I changed it from trade shows to telecom, and if I hit post, it's not going to tell me, oh, you changed from this account to that account. What it's going to tell you is it's going to say, that the record was modified, but it's going to say no audited change. So the reason for this is because Intacct does not yet support audit and rows. So you're not yet going to have that ability to do that. Like I said before, I do believe Intacct is working on this. I have no idea for an estimated time of delivery, but I know that it would take quite a lot of resource allocation to pull that off, computing resources. So as they get a little bit more advanced, it's possible that we see that get rolled out. But as of right now, you're just not going to get that. So unfortunately, you're not going to have that level of detail, but still, it gives you the ability to show who changed what and when and stuff like that. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you, because I did mention it in the slides, is I just showed you the record by record audit trail. But if I go to platform services, I mentioned before, there is now an audit history data object that I can then write custom reports based off of. So if you have permissions to platform services, it might be called customization services in your instance. But regardless, you go to that module, you can create a custom report. And if you're not familiar with the custom report writer, you can kind of think of it as a raw data querying tool. So it's more of like it's a report writer that allows you to get whatever reports you want to get out of Intacct that aren't a financial report, and they aren't like a standard module report, like a trial balance or something like that. But notice how I have all of these different data objects we can pull from. But the one that we're going to be pulling from in this case is the audit history, source. This is the source that has all the audit trail information spanning all objects in the system. So one thing to note before we get going on this is you want to make sure that you are using filter criteria when you're building a report like this, because if you don't include filter criteria, it's going to show you all auditable events throughout the entirety of Intacct across all records, which, depending on how long you've been on Intacct, could be massive. So just set some filter parameters with what you're looking for so that you don't spend 5 minutes trying to run a report and sifting through hundreds of thousands of rows. But anyway, let's just go ahead and move forward to our second step. So notice how we have relatively few fields that we can pull from. I did want to select all of these just so I can show you what level of detail you can get. Like I mentioned to you before, you're going to want to use filters to pick and choose what you want to get out of the system. But since this is a demo environment, I'm just going to run it wide open because there's really not a lot of history. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this report. And I'm going to click on View. Okay, so on our list of transactions, or our audit history list right here, we can see that on 9/16, there's 9/16. This AP bill object was modified. Here's the record number. It'll tell you who modified it and by which source. And you even have like the you can even have the IP address from where it was accessed. So so yeah. And the cool thing about the Audit Trail functionality is even if someone didn't make any changes to a record, it will tell you when they accessed it. So that, and this report is where it kind of takes, it goes deeper than the record by record audit trail I showed you earlier, because this shows you when people accessed and just looked at something. So if you really want to get a handle as to what your people are doing on a day-to-day basis, this is a really useful way of doing it. And I have to apologize in advance if you hear my puppy whining in the background. So as you can see though, this is a demo environment and it gave me a whole bunch of records right here. For a live environment that you've been using for multiple years, you're going to have a lot of records there. So really, that was about. Sorry about that. Hush, puppy. So he. Sorry. So pretty much that's everything I wanted to run through today. So we talked about how you can go record by record and see the audit trail on a record by record basis. We talked about how you can use the audit history report to show who did what, where, and when, and all that good stuff. So with that, I don't really have anything additional. Just to take us to the last slide of the presentation. Thank you. So if you have any questions pertaining to this session or another session or anything in regards to Intacct, just shoot us off a note at support@mainersolutions.com, and myself or one of the other consultants will get right on it. So I think that will conclude this session. Thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.